was young, my teacher told me that I was free. Yeah. And as a child, I grew up, programmed by TV. Yeah. As a teenage boy, I found out just how free is free.
All right, welcome to Lesiak Report, and okay, I'm going to have some guests tonight. Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties, but yeah, I'm going to try to add some people to this call. Yeah, Jared, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, yeah, I think we're live. Yeah, we're live, and then we just got to have Caton call in again, and then I'll add him. Well, I think you can call in on that, because we're, okay. All right, yeah, Clayton, what's up?
Hey, Jared told me to call back.
Yeah, okay, so we're live right now.
Is Jared here yet, or no?
Yeah, he is.
I'm here, Clayton.
Mm-hmm.
Jared. We can talk about anything you guys want.
Oh.
I mean, I've already outnumbered 2 libertarians to 1, so.
Yeah. What is it you wanted to talk about? Roads?
Yeah, that could be fun.
All right, we can get into the whole roads argument. So, you know, the whole thing against libertarianism, or one of the, as Tom Woods said, it's like at the top of the libertarian drinking game is the question: who will build the roads? You know, if we without government, who will finance the construction of infrastructure? So. Clayton, what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think the whole quote in itself is a little bit incorrect because it says something about, like, there's going to be a house over here and the Sears over there, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the quote.
And I think the problem with that is how would they have built the Sears and how would they have built the house with not already roads being there?
Okay, hold on. Jared, what do you have anything to...
Well, I would say that the roads would be built first, kind of.
But why? Why would Sears take a risk and build the road with no guarantee of success?
Sears?
Yeah,
I would say that roads would be built. Sorry, the road would be built with, to give companies the opportunity to build along. The road company would have the incentive to build roads so that. With the expectation that companies would be built along them.
But who's funding that company?
The people that are driving on the roads.
I mean, it all starts with roads already being there, though.
Well, now it does, yes.
So, I mean, it's a little, like, it's hard to argue your side of it when there's already in place one.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, is government right now efficient at, the construction of roads? I mean, look at how much construction, like if you're in northern Illinois, I bet all across the country, you have construction on them, like, all the time, you know what I mean? And, like, because, the roads are, kind of not even built that well so that the workers can have, something to do and fix the roads like every year or every couple of years, And is this efficient, Could the free market provide better alternatives for this? And, why does government need to be financing roads? I think you have... I'm sure there's examples in America and across the globe of, roads that are financed by private companies. So,
I mean, I think the best alternative would be a mixture because if you look at, like, the infrastructure we have now, you can drive from where you are to anywhere in the country. Like, you can drive to some hillbilly's house out in Wyoming because there are roads connected to it. Now, I think a good mixture would be, now that things are already in place, that roads should now start becoming more and more, like, less government involved. But for starting infrastructure, you need government because there's no incentive to to spend any amount of money on a road to some random guy's house. But the government will do that, and the government will deliver posts to that person, and the government will care for that person, even though it's a minority. So because it's a government and a collective, like collection of all of the money, it can take those kind of hits. Because there's no profit in building a road to a town with 20 people, but the government does it because they have to.
I would say there is a profit in building a road to a town of 20. However many you said, because in order for those people to leave their town, they would need to pay the road company. So the road company can then make money off of those people, and that's the incentive. Although I think that if you were to start over, which obviously we can't do, we already have a road system in place, but if you were starting from scratch, you could still have private companies building the roads. It would just be more city, or all of society would be oriented more around cities. Right? You wouldn't have as many outlying towns, and then the cities would gradually expand. So, I mean, I kind of agree with what you said, but at the same time, I think that there is profit motive, just because if
those people would have to be incredibly wealthy, because if you're going to spend millions of dollars potentially on a road, you're going to need to have some kind of guarantee that those people will use it and they'll pay for it. Like, if you're going to, because I think, I can't quite remember, but it's like an insane amount of money to build like a mile of road. And if you're going to build a road 50 miles out of your way to a town of 26 people, you're going to need a guarantee that those people will go to the companies that pay for the road. And I don't think there is one. So in order to set up an infrastructure like we have now, there needs to be very little profit incentive in doing so. I mean, obviously the government built roads between cities before they built roads to like some weird town that no one goes to. So they did it in a way that is very free market-like, where they build a road where it makes most sense. And even like they're constructing wider roads where more people travel, like in Chicago. There's always going to be construction because they always want more roads going in and out.
So why couldn't the private sector do the same?
Because I don't think the private sector would care about one guy living in the mountains. The private sector would build roads pretty well for cities, for already established groups of people that you're going to be guaranteed that businesses will succeed there. But even like in Minnesota, where my grandmother lives, there's like a 4,000 person town there, and there's like there's a Target and a Sears and a Walmart, and already the Sears and the Target have failed. So like, why would they take the risk in building all those roads there, knowing that they're probably going to fail?
Well, I think that at this point there's already roads in place that go to those towns, but if, like I said, if you had started from scratch where you needed roads to get places and private companies built the roads, you would see quite a bit of a focus on, the population would be more concentrated. There wouldn't be as many outlying towns, which I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I think that it could still work. You just would have more people living in cities and suburbs. And, I mean, nobody could really build their house out in the middle of nowhere because there wouldn't be a road to get there. But they could build it in the suburbs because there's roads that connect the suburbs, and then there would only be possibly highways that would connect the cities.
I mean, it would work, maybe, but I would argue that what we have now is better than what that would have produced. Because, like, look at a road map anytime of, like, the United States, and there's just roads. There are roads everywhere. And if you look about profit incentive, for probably 50% of those roads, there isn't a profit incentive for them, but there's a convenience incentive. It's like FedEx, UPS, and the United States Postal Service. Yeah, FedEx and UPS pretty much are quicker and better most of the time, but if you live in a rural area, it costs a lot more to have FedEx do it, whereas the U.S. Post Office takes the loss and does it for the same price.
Which is why if you had privatized roads, you wouldn't really have rural areas. You wouldn't really have rural towns.
I completely agree, and I think that it's a good idea to have those.
Why? I mean, because
that's where most of our agriculture comes from.
That's true. But that there in itself is a profit motive for the companies to build roads, because without the roads to the rural areas, there would be no agriculture. So people
but the company has no incentive to do that. The company would not make money by having a road there; they would just get food. So the company would have to take a hit in order to go and get food.
Well,
whereas if the government built the roads, no companies are taking a hit, and they all get food anyway.
People would likely be willing to fund roads in rural areas if it meant getting them food.
I mean, that's what's happening now, isn't it?
What's happening now?
People are funding roads that don't make sense, that aren't necessarily the best for business, because they need them.
Well, yes, and it would probably happen under the private sector, too.
I just don't think it would. I mean, theoretically, a lot of things would have to happen for that to happen. Whereas if it's all government-run, it's going to happen regardless.
Okay.
I think we've exhausted this subject. If you guys want to...
Well, I mean, I really have to read more. But I think we can segue kind of into another thing that I think Jared wanted to talk about, and that's what's going on with the Boston, marathon bombing. So, if you guys want to give in your insights into what, your analysis of what happened.
I mean, I think it was a disaster. Like, it was a tragedy, and it was extremely sad, and the one person already died, and one person's life is essentially over because of it. And I mean, like, not to sound terribly insensitive, this is only a tragedy because of, like, the way these people died. Because, I mean, people die in accidents all the time.
Like in Chicago, you have, like, several people, well, that's even an exaggeration, but you have, like, at least one person a day, is shot in some gang-related thing, even two or three. So,
I mean, that's what I'm saying.
I understand.
It's a tragedy that these people died.
Because,
and the people should be brought to justice. But why is this news coverage not in Chicago every day?
Because yesterday, or like 2 days ago, I think yesterday, there was an earthquake in China, 160 people dead and counting, and that's not going to be the top news on CNN or Fox. The top news is still going to be the Boston situation with the suspect that they've captured. So, it's kind of, I get what you're saying, and I agree with your premise that the media kind of picks and chooses, and sadly, since it happened in America, it's more, we think of it as more, important than, 200 people dead in China, and an earthquake. So
I think it's because we want to put a face to our enemy. Like, if someone attacks Boston, we want a face, and we want them to get caught. But like the fertilizer explosion in Texas, we can't put a face to that.
I was going to mention
like
that,
we can't blame Al Qaeda for that. We can't blame Afghanistan. We can't blame Chechnya. We can't blame radical Muslims. It just happened. So we're going to look past that and focus more on the Boston Marathon because we can put a face to it, and the face of being plastered all over the news.
A little bit of a counterpoint to that, though, would be that the Boston bombing has significant foreign policy implications. I mean, now we know, maybe not. We're not sure if he had relations to an organization, but at the time, I mean, terrorism does have big implications on our role in the foreign stage. But I'm not necessarily sure that that's even why people care. It might just be the drama and it being in Boston and at the marathon and everything. I'm not sure.
I mean, there's already been, obviously with anything that happens like this, you have some people, on ends of the political spectrum who are already jumping to conclusions, minutes after that it's some sort of false flag or inside job. What are your thoughts or reactions to that? There was some sort of
kind of like jumping to conclusions. It's completely stupid, and it looks poorly on America. When we try to blame someone without any evidence, it makes us just look like assholes.
Mm-hmm.
Like CNN was they failed miserably on the coverage of Boston.
Yeah, actually, we were talking about this. Charlie Kirk, and we were like, after our event we had here in about Obamacare, we were talking about how CNN it was like misreporting, and they didn't have the facts straight, and that they were still like looking for the lake or something, while the other networks were already on the suspect or something. So they were pretty bad with the coverage of that.
Yeah, several newspapers ran photos on their front cover saying, like, FBI is looking for these people, and it turned out that those weren't even the right people. And those people, I feel really bad for them because their lives are at stake. If somebody sees them, who knows what's going to happen to them? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even New York Post and other newspapers just took pictures that they clearly did not have any information about and ran them as suspects. That really made me sad.
Yeah. All right. Call-in number 512-539-0606. This is on Polysmack. Hopefully some people are listening from there, and if they want to give us a call and add their input. What do you... Okay, so Clayton, I think you were talking about how... do you believe that the suspects should have their Miranda rights suspended since they're, supposedly enemy combatants or terrorists? Do they not have the same rights as any suspect on American soil would have to, right to a jury trial and innocent before proven guilty?
I mean, ideally, I would like this suspect to be treated like an American citizen. I would want him to be read his Miranda rights. I agree with them that they didn't do it because we didn't know the full story about him yet, whether or not he was like an enemy combatant, and he was also injured, and they could have thought like, hey, he's not in the right state of mind, he's bleeding, he needs to go to a hospital, so there's no point in reading his rights because he's not technically being detained, he's just being treated. So I agree with the decision to not read his Miranda rights as they were taking him down, but I think ideally they should read him his rights. He should be tried in civilian court, and he should be treated like any other criminal, but I'm realistic in the fact that I doubt that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, I kind of agree also that they didn't read him his rights right away because, number one, he was, as far as I know, not in a state to really even comprehend them. Like right now he's being treated as a patient at a hospital, even though he is technically being detained. But that is different. But eventually, I agree they should definitely read him his rights. I really don't like to hear people like John McCain and Lindsey Graham say things. I mean, obviously, what he presumably did was just horrible. But we do have a justice system for a reason, and I'm sure he'll be found guilty. So
I mean, this poor kid is guilty before innocent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, the evidence is the evidence that we have, it looks like he did it, but, I mean, what we have isn't conclusive, and he's not going to be treated fairly. Like, right, there's not a chance this guy's going to be treated fairly.
Just the situation where he was throwing grenades at police, I mean, it makes it look like he's guilty, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve a trial. I mean, there's plenty of criminals that, look obviously guilty beforehand, but you still give them a trial. I mean, that's a big part of our justice system. You don't just assume someone's guilty. If they are guilty, then they're found guilty in court, and I'm pretty sure he will be. So, but he should definitely get a trial. I mean, you don't just declare him guilty and throw him in jail for the rest of his life or give him the death penalty.
What prison would we put him in, though? Like, what prison would he not be murdered in?
Is he going to be taken to Gitmo or some other place?
I mean, if he goes to prison in any public or private prison in America, he will be shanked immediately. Because he attacked America, and even prisoners can come together on that.
Well,
unless do you know if they're going to send him to Gitmo or not, or do you know anything about?
I don't think they're going to, but that's what Lindsey Graham was calling for the other day, which is.
Yeah. Well, which is again one of the promises Obama broke. He said I'm going to end Gitmo, and we're what 5 years into his presidency, it's still up and running, and all sorts of, I think, rights that they should have under the Geneva Convention are violated. I mean, they're torturing them, which, just even Chura talked about this. If you're being tortured, like say if you're being waterboarded, you're going to admit to doing anything. And I don't think it's moral, humane. It doesn't speak good of this country's character, and it's just... It's really doesn't produce any effective or true results, because torture is not the way that people can admit to anything if they're being tortured just because of the brutality of it. So
Gitmo is such a touchy subject. It shouldn't even be a thing, and I think it should be shut down, but obviously for some reason they have not.
Well, I think Obama realized once he got into office that, and I kind of blame him, but I don't entirely. I think he realized that it's a more complicated issue. I definitely think it should be closed, but at the same time, when he gets there, when he was elected and when he was sworn in, I think there's probably a lot of people that approached him and said, we're not going to do this right away. Like, if you're going to do it, take some time, although he hasn't even made any progress on it, which is disappointing. But, there's a lot of things that I think that he promised when he was running, and then when he got into office, he didn't want to upset people and make, quick decisions or anything. But, what is he now, 5 years into his presidency? I think I'd say it's about time that he get around to those promises.
I think he has a better chance of doing it in his second term than he did in his first. Because now he's not vying for re-election.
Right.
Yeah, and also in his second term, he can be a lot more radical and can have the gloves guns off now that he's never going to run for election again. So, gun confiscation and whatnot could happen potentially.
I think we're going to see a different Obama second term than we did first term, definitely.
I think so too.
Do you think the bombing will have? Because originally there were some tweets. Some Americans, thought that the bombers were from Czech Republic. I don't know if you saw that, and they had to clarify. And actually, the ambassador or one of the representatives for the Czech embassy, he was like, this is. He added that sarcastically, this is a result of America's public education system. They thought he was from the Czech Republic when it's actually Chechnya. I think it's, I don't know where exactly it is, but I'm pretty sure it's southwestern Russia.
Yeah, it's like by all those states. Yeah,
somewhere in that area. Yeah. So, do you think this will have any implications, I don't know, on foreign policy? It is still part of Russia, but if I'm not mistaken, I think the U.S. was supporting the secessionist movement over there. At least, the U.S. seems to, do things like this as kind of prop up some secessionist movements to destabilize countries.
I don't think we should have any political or foreign difference because of this. Like, this was not the act of a country.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Americans have a very big issue with separating an individual from a group.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, especially we should. Yeah, Jared. I was just gonna say, even in as far as I was reading, he's never even lived in Chechnya, right? They just report that his nationality is Chechnyan, but I'm pretty sure he lived in a bordering country.
I thought he was actually a naturalized American citizen, but
well, yeah, he's been here for 10 years, and before that he lived in, I can't remember the name of the country, but it was not Chechnya. Mm-hmm. And then of course we contact Chechnya, like, oh, do you have any comments on this issue? Do you have any, what do you have to say to this? And what do we expect them to say? This man is not even a citizen of their country. He's just of that nationality. His parents lived there, but he never lived there. I just think that, equating him with a foreign country is kind of a rash reaction, considering that he's been here for so long and he's not even a citizen of the country that he's being reported, or at least linked to in the media.
Yeah.
I think that comes down to us wanting to put a bigger face on it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because now we have the faces of the ones who did it, and that's not good enough. We want to put a bigger face. Like, who's more responsible for this?
Right. We want to see it as kind of a possible problem that lies overseas that we might have to deal with, or at least a larger group that we can blame. Especially after 9/11, I think people assume that it's a foreign, problem, when in reality he's been here so long. He was basically an American. I mean, he was an American citizen. I don't think that we should be blaming other countries or other groups other than him and anyone who he was working with.
I completely agree. And I was reading an interesting article today that related these bombing attacks to a defense, or I guess against gun laws. What are your, I think it's saying, because these crazy individuals were able to produce such chaos and such destruction with things that are already illegal, that should deflate any feelings that guns should be illegal. Because crazy people are going to do crazy things anyway.
I thought it was interesting how Michael Moore tweeted, right after the attacks, that, today's the tax day Tea Party's events all across the country is April 15th, so this was must have been, a Tea Party right-wing extremist, and I think maybe some people on the radical right or whatever might have also probably jumped that there was a left-wing extremist. So, I mean, a lot of speculation, obviously, that turned out to be complete BS. But it seems like Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good tragedy go to waste. So I'm sure this will just be part of the reaching agenda to push through gun control, even though they're temporarily stalled.
Yeah, I'm not
politics.
I'm not sure exactly how they could use it to push gun control, but
if anything, it would go against gun control.
I don't think it'll go against gun control either necessarily. I mean, I don't see them being too intertwined. Other than it kind of distracted everyone from the debate that was raging beforehand. That was the big issue last week. But other than that, I don't think that people will necessarily use it as a justification for or against gun control.
Well, I guess
that makes sense.
I don't know if you have anything else to say, but there's, I don't know if it was not yesterday, but on Friday or Thursday, CISPA passed the House overwhelmingly. I don't know if you want to, comment. And now it's going to head to the Senate, and I don't know if Rand Paul said he was going to filibuster it or not, but there obviously is going to be opposition from him to it, and I don't know. What I thought was interesting that 196 Republicans voted for it and 29 against. So, more Democrats obviously voted against it than for it. So, I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's funny that we make fun of China for censoring the internet, and we say, "Oh, look at how China has this not free internet, stupid communists," and then we're trying to push bills like SOPA and CISPA, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. This should not pass, and if it passes, Obama better veto it.
Yeah.
That's all. This is ridiculous.
I mean, I was disappointed in just really the whole situation because we had SOPA and PIPA go through earlier, and it failed pretty much solely because of public opposition. There were all the profile pictures, and tons of people wrote to their representatives, and then everyone loses focus of it, and then the Congress just pushes it right through, and they don't have to deal with that. It just shows that they don't necessarily care about public opinion, but yeah, I hope the president vetoes it. I'm not 100% sure he will. I don't actually think he will, but if he does, that would make me happy.
I don't know if it needs 60 votes or the simple 51 majority to pass the Senate, but hopefully there is some opposition because it seems like they try to do this. in the aftermath of, what happened in Boston. This is kind of how the Federal Reserve Act passed in 1913. It was like December 24th. So a bunch of the Congress had already gone to their families back home in their respective states and districts. And the ones that remained, there was obviously a quorum, but they weren't really too interested in the legislation, so they voted for it, and that's how the Federal Reserve passed. I believe it was in December of 1913, or it might have been the year before, but it seems like always when there's some kind of event that grips the nation, like the gay marriage, like during the whole gay marriage debate, and I do support marriage equality, but at the same time, I don't think it's the most pressing issue out there. Like the balanced budget, I don't know if you've seen the profile pictures, with the the white bars, and then how about a balanced budget instead? I think it's interesting during the marriage debate where they passed the Monsanto Protection Act and nobody was paying attention, and also they kind of passed NDAA during the New Year, where everyone's focused on getting drunk and celebrating the New Year. So I find it interesting how during these types of times is when they choose to pass really bad legislation that people are just going to miss, and
It's not necessarily bad legislation they pass. It's just it's easier to get your own agenda through when there's less opposition. So
which is why
you're going to take the opportunity. Well, it's not bad or good. It's just, if we have a Republican Senate, the Democrats would take an advantage to doing it at a time where there's not as much opposition. And if you have a Democratic Senate, things would be the exact same thing on the Republican side. So it's not exactly bad legislation that gets through. It's just not popular legislation gets through. Which, is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing, depending on which party you're a fan of, I guess.
So far, it's been pretty bad. Although NDAA had bipartisan support, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So,
the Federal Reserve. I don't want to get into that, but we don't have time to get into that. But I support it.
Yeah. Well, even though, were you serious when you claimed to be converted by Esperson to the Austrian school? No.
Basically, yeah, I was.
So being that you're, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, but opposition to the central bank is a key tenet of the Austrian school of thought, right?
Yes, it is.
So
I think a key tenet is more opposition to the standard usage of a central bank.
I guess I would say so. I don't know. I'm a little bit intrigued to know also how you could claim to be converted to the Austrian school while also being pro-Federal Reserve.
The Federal Reserve can be used to promote good economic policy, but it hasn't. The Federal Reserve right now is so reactive that it cannot help. If the market goes down one day, they're like, change the interest rates and the bond rates, and they fuck everything up. Whereas if a smart, intelligent person was in charge of the Federal Reserve, they would not be striving for 5% inflation a year. That to me is not good economic policy. Mm-hmm. And I agree with most of the Austrian tenets of economics. However, I think they can be achieved through the use of good central banking. And I was talking to Esperson about this, and he agreed with me on that a good central bank, used correctly, can be beneficial to Austrian economic thought.
I'd say the difference, though, is that most Austrian economists would say that a central bank cannot be run by the government for it to be, for it to promote Austrian ideals, because, Austrians are generally pro-free market, and any infringement upon the market is seen as, not any infringement, but generally I don't think Austrianism supports a government-run central bank.
Technically it's not a government-run central bank.
Well, yeah, it's a private banking cartel that has absolutely no oversight from Congress, and even though the audit passed, I believe it passed. I don't know if it's been enforced yet, to see where they've been lending money to. I know when Bernanke was interviewed, he didn't know where like $6 trillion the Federal Reserve had lent to. So I don't even think there's been an audit yet of what the Federal Reserve done, and once there is
the way it works now, I disagree with its existence. It's doing a very bad job. In fact, I would say the Federal Reserve caused this recession. But that's a longer story. But I still think it can be like a good use of a central bank can help the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I just think that, the fact that, it can print money at will and just artificially manipulate interest rates. To me, that does go against the principles of, free market economics, and I just think that, it's good to see that there's been a movement, to end the Fed, but,
I think the only role the Federal Reserve should have is the money supply, which is not the amount of money that is printed, but it's the amount of money in circulation.
So you do believe that the market should decide all interest rates?
The interest rates for what?
For lending.
Lending from a bank or lending bank to bank?
Either.
I think lending bank to bank should be controlled by the Fed. Lending otherwise should not.
That's good.
But I think the way the Fed works now is they control interest rates, the money supply, and the printing of money, correct?
Right.
Essentially. The printing of money is there because having a steady rate of inflation is quote unquote or quote good for the economy. I don't agree with that. But if the Fed only changed the money supply, like that's currently in the market through the usage of bonds, then that can be used for good.
I definitely see where you're coming from. I don't entirely agree with you, but I do think you are more. You do have some streaks of Austrianism, which kind of surprises me, actually.
I'm still the most radically conservative liberal you've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Grow up in the Middle East, right? Jared?
Well, since we're talking about money, do you guys have any thoughts on the whole Bitcoin kind of spike in interest in it, and whether or not it's not maybe it's not necessarily a scam, but whether or not it's something that can actually have the potential, and whether or not it's something worth to invest in?
It's no more legitimate than any other form of currency, and it's basically going to be used by someone who wants to avoid tariffs on trading.
I think that it's a good idea in that it can be a competing currency, but I was a little bit curious as to why so many libertarians jumped on board and Austrians jumped on board with it, considering that it's really just another form of money that has no backing, has even less backing than the dollar, has much less confidence from the public than the dollar. Honestly, I know people who invested in it, and I think that was a pretty bad decision. Just because, from a libertarian standpoint, yes, you want competing currencies, but that doesn't mean that any currency that competes is necessarily a good investment. And I think Bitcoin was a pretty bad investment.
I don't even know how it's doing in the market. I just know that it crashed at one point.
Yeah, I don't think it's recovered, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, because I know there have been laws kind of introduced by kind of like Ron Paul Republican type state legislatures, to allow for competing currencies in states, that local municipalities or whatever will be able to have their own form of currency to trade with and use. And I believe there's already some towns that actually have implemented this. So I guess this is a libertarian, kind of thing to support, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Bitcoin is good. And it should be obviously viewed with a certain level of suspicion, as should really anything, and should be researched before you kind of get on board with it, I guess.
Yeah, I just think we shouldn't. It's gonna fail in like 10 months' time.
I think it was kind of first of all, I think it's important to acknowledge what most people use it for, which is black market deals, because it's not traceable. So, that kind of makes it, that kind of made it fail in the first place. But I would just kind of, to reiterate my point, I believe in competing currencies just because it allows people more options, especially if one currency fails. But that doesn't mean that, just because I believe in competing currencies, if some random competing currency, pops up like Bitcoin kind of did, it's definitely fairly new. That doesn't necessarily mean that I want to buy it. I don't want to buy it, even though I support the fact that it competes. That doesn't mean that it's a good decision to buy into any competing currency, especially a currency that's entirely online, a currency that's, it has no backing. It really isn't used for much outside of the black market, and nobody's really using it to buy anything outside of that. People are just buying it with the expectation that it'll do well in the markets. And now,
I think people are already buying Bitcoin to sell them later when they're worth more.
No, that's literally, it's just that in the black market, which I would say that the black market is fairly small compared to, that's small level deals compared to the people who are buying massive amounts of Bitcoin with the idea that it'll be worth more when they sell it. But currency can't function like that. You can't.
Bitcoin is basically just a company-less stock. It's a stock that has no company, and the only market that you can view to look and see if it's doing well or not is the cost.
Right.
It's like buying a stock in Microsoft, except there's no security that that's going to stay the price, which is why it was popular, because you could buy it for $40, and then you don't know if it's going to go to 0 or 400, because there's nothing tangible with it. There's no guarantee of anything like with a company.
Yeah, it's open to a lot of skepticism and just uncertainty, because it's just some, online currency that is used by a relatively low amount of people. And like I said, I welcome competing currencies, but I don't see it as anything that's going to be massively successful, just because really the only reason people are buying it is because it's a competing currency. So while I support competing currencies, it's just, there's no way that a currency can survive when it's entirely, the only reason it's being bought is because people want to see the value go up, which can make the value go up, but all of a sudden you're going to hit a point where people start to try to get out of it as quick as they can, and we might be seeing that point, and no one's going to hold on to something to a currency that's open to so much skepticism at this point when the price begins to tank.
Yeah. So April 19th was the anniversary of a bunch of things, including the Revolutionary War, Oklahoma City bombings, and the siege, or the culminating point of the siege at Waco, where I believe 70 something or 80 people were killed by the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, that had his troops go in and finish off the complex after a fire started. You guys have anything to comment on either Oklahoma City or Waco?
Not really. Those are terrible things that happened, and I think it's in the best interest of everyone to learn from them and move on. Like the Waco thing, what we learned from that is you need city planning and you need like safety inspections at fertilizer plants. Because apparently this plant was carrying like 1,900 times the amount of legal like ammonium or something, and that's why it blew up.
Chris, were you referring to the fertilizer explosion or the Waco incident?
I forgot about, but I guess both, kind of. Both the incident, and I believe it was 1995 with David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. But I mean, also, I mean, now the modern day, what happened a couple days ago with the fertilizer plant. But I mean, I was kind of more, into what happened in '95 because I think it is an example of state-sponsored terrorism. I mean, I'm not really defending Koresh. I mean, this was a cult. He believed he was like the second coming of Jesus or something, and there was probably some sort of sexual molestation or a bunch of shady stuff going on. And I believe that why they went in was because of reports of people who were expelled from the cult, or whatever you want to call it. They were reporting on what was going on, and also like that there were a bunch of like some pretty advanced weaponry and guns and stuff that were illegally bought or illegally owned. So I think the government and I mean there was a fire there, and I think to this day it's unknown whether the fire or not was started by Koresh's people or whether it was initiated by the government troops that were there. But either way, it was the handling by the Clinton administration was terrible, and I think people need to remember it and just because there have been other incidents like the Ruby Ridge incident where a bunch of troops came into northern Idaho. A guy named Randy Weaver and a couple others were were just living kind of off the grid in a log cabin in northern Idaho, and the federal troops came in because they wanted to get him out, and they got him over like some legal drug deal with an undercover agent, and then they ended up killing his pregnant wife and their dog, and I think another person. So I just think that people got to remember that the state has committed crimes against its people, and these things should kind of be remembered. And I guess in today's world, you're not really going to hear much about things like this from your history professors or the mainstream media or whatever. So
yeah, I mean, I haven't read too much into to the Waco incident. I know that it was a horrible tragedy, that it went up in flames, and probably could have been handled in a better way. But I think that I think we can learn from whatever happened and kind of move on from that. Just learn from how it was handled, because I don't really think that, like I said, I haven't read much of it, but kind of prevent those kind of situations from happening in the future and maybe handle them a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what else you guys want to talk about, but tomorrow, I think tomorrow is Earth Day, April 22nd, so I don't know if you guys want to address global warming at all and what your thoughts are on that.
I believe it is happening, and I believe it is man sped up.
Mm-hmm. But what about incidents like ClimateGate, where you had like a university in the UK where they admitted to, they found out that all these documents and stuff were falsified, that showing that humans were causing man-made caused CO2 was causing warming of the planet. It was shown to be a massive scientific fraud. So
I think one person's fraudulent data does not disprove the entire thing, and there have been plenty of other scientific reports on it that all came up with pretty much the same conclusion, not to the extremities that the falsified data came up with. But I mean, there is substantial proof and evidence that global warming is happening, and there is substantial proof and evidence that we are to blame for most of it. I mean, yes, the planet obviously goes through climate shifts all the time, but if you like the stuff we're doing is contributing to that and worse, like making the situation much worse. And I had this debate with Charlie like 3 months ago on PolySmack, and he showed me this paper that like he read that he thought which disproved the humans' interactions with global warming. But within the paper itself, they even admitted that what humans are doing is making global warming worse. Right, but in the paper, it was more arguing some things we're doing aren't as bad as we thought. But it started right away with saying that our CO2 emissions are way more than they've ever been in human history, and because of this, there's more greenhouse gases, and global warming is becoming worse because of it.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely some data that's been falsified, like Chris said. But I would say, just from looking at the evidence, there is definitely some natural climate escalation, but the amount, or the temperature escalation, but the amount of CO2 that's in the atmosphere compared to historic levels, and then looking at the temperature, the global temperature, how much it has risen as a result. I mean, there's definitely a correlation if you look at those two. As the CO2 began to increase, temperature began to increase, and they're both at levels that we have never really seen in human history, and they happened right at the same time. So I tend to agree with Clayton that, there's not much evidence to suggest to the contrary that, that this is somehow natural. Some of it is natural, but overall I think that it's definitely somehow human caused, but where we probably disagree is what to do about it. I mean, I don't think that putting extreme regulations on business is the way to go about it at all.
Yeah, like the UN. I mean, they're pushing. They're like, I think Agenda 21 kind of covers the whole, the climate thing and how carbon tax and stuff like that. I mean, when you look at like Al Gore, I mean, he talks about the need for, being kind of prudent and saving energy and whatnot, and then he flies in a private jet and his house emits a ton of, energy and waste and whatnot. So, I think that it's being used really to kind of push more governmental control over people, with all sorts of restrictions and whatnot. And I just think the idea of carbon tax, of taxing you for your emissions of your car, I think that's just really insane.
Yeah, I disagree with the carbon tax. I think a better way to go about it is to use property rights. If it's having an effect on someone's property, then I'm generally fond of the idea of free market environmentalism, whereas seeing harm to the environment as a property rights issue, so that if somebody's property is affected by it, then they can take action against whoever's causing it. So I think that would be the best way, ideally, to reduce carbon emissions, is just to have people, kind of either sue in court or go after the companies for doing things, rather than having the government, kind of intervene and impose some sort of tax on however much carbon they're emitting. I just think it's more efficient to have individuals.
Both accomplish the same thing, because what we have to do is we have to make really good business strategy into not good business strategy, because it makes total sense to ignore environmental problems with your business because it's cheaper, and humans always want the best, cheapest alternative to anything, and American business is founded on the fact that we want to produce the most possible, sell it for the most amount of money, and pay the least amount of money for us to produce it. So there needs to be a massive social shift, as well as incredible profit incentives to no longer be extremely wasteful and harmful to the environment. Whether that comes through free market or through government intervention, it doesn't matter to me. I just want it to be fixed. But I think realistically, we haven't done anything. On the government side, there are a few regulations, but obviously not as much as that need to be. And the free market, I don't see anyone suing big companies unless they're spilling uranium on their lawn or something. So, I mean, a giant societal shift needs to happen before anything will happen, either on the government level or the free market level, because no one gives a fuck right now. Because they go outside and they say, oh, it's not that warm. I'm fine. I'm going to be dead before it gets too bad. And it's selfish, but humans are selfish. We just don't care.
I mean, I agree where, I don't think that it should be government run at all, but I agree where you're coming from with societal change. I mean, I think that with a lot of issues, whereas, government is not very effective at forcing people to change their behavior, whether it's, through health habits or other things. Government's not going to be effective at forcing people to become more healthy or become more environmentally friendly, as well as a societal change will. If people are pressuring companies, if people are boycotting companies that are emitting a lot of carbon emissions, if there's that, societal, if the societal norm becomes that you should not be doing that, and if you are doing that, you'll be boycotted or you'll be sued, I think that's a much more effective way of going about it than applying some sort of tax to companies for every, X amount of carbon that they emit. That's not an effective way to go about it.
The worry with that is that I think, personally, that society is not going to shift until it's too late. We're not going to force everyone, or we're not going to convince everyone to become environmentally aware until they have to. And by that time, it's already too late. And I mean, we're already in the midst of one of the hottest and worst climate change eras we've ever been in. I think I read a few hours ago that the last 30 years have been the warmest 30 years in recorded human history.
I would say with the whole thing about it being too late, I would say the same thing about government, though. In terms of, the United States, I mean, I think it might already, I don't want to say it's too late because that sounds so, apocalyptic, but I mean, it is pretty bad. However, even if the United States had some sort of sweeping governmental reform where they were going to, massively reduce their carbon footprint, I mean, there are so many other countries in the world that are emitting carbon, especially at levels that are much greater than us, namely China, that is not...
China is a piece of shit.
Their government is not going to do anything about it before it's too late either. So I would say, even if society is too late, I think government would be too late also, which kind of begs the question, well, how can we fix it so that it's not too late? But I would say that society, and the market is going to address the problem in a better and in a way that can have a better chance of saving, reducing this than the government would, especially with all these different governments that, they're not going to be efficient at actually combating the problem.
I think, if you look at European countries, I know it's a much smaller scale than America, and I understand that, but their people in Europe have shifted towards the environment, which allows the governments to be successful at it. Now, if they were going to go free market, even when the people shifted, it would have happened anyway. I don't think it matters whether or not the government does it or the free market does it, but nothing will get done until there's enormous support for it. Like in Sweden, they're all very environmentally aware, and they're one of the most clean nations on earth. Same with most other European nations. So I agree, the free market might do it, government might do it. Nothing is going to work in America until it's far too late because we're stubborn and stupid.
Yeah, Jared, there's some common misconceptions of libertarians in that, they're anti-environment. They just want to, sell off everything, land to the highest bidder, all federal government lands, and just kind of, they don't care about animals and the environment. What do you have to say to all the people who, believe that, and then a lot of people do, in America?
I mean, they don't hate the environment. They just don't go with the mainstream idea of fixing it, which is government intervention. Which, I mean, if you care about the environment, it does not matter how you plan on fixing it. All that matters is that you're aware of the problem. and you're working at some way to fix it. By saying you want the free market to fix the problem, you've already admitted that it's a problem, and you're already part of the correct mindset. It doesn't matter the ways in which you want something accomplished. It matters that you want it accomplished. Like, look at our budget. Like, our budget, both sides, I hope, want it to be balanced, which is, I think, why something will be done about it. But if one side saw no reason to balance it, then there would be no change, because it doesn't matter. You need both sides of any argument to agree on the end goal before anything can be done. And the problem with environmentalism is that there are two sides, maybe not Republican Democrat, just two sides that disagree on it. Mm-hmm. And until both the sides have the same end goal, nothing will be done.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of those misconceptions exist because people don't really, I mean, free market environmentalism is a thing, but not a lot of people know about it. Because if you look at most environmentalists, like, Al Gore, and just the mainstream environmentalist movement is pretty supportive of government intervention. I doubt you'd ever hear Al Gore say that he believes that the market is the solution to the problem. And, that's what people hear, and they assume that the other side, just doesn't care about the problem, that they, and some people don't care about the problem, which is fine, but I think a lot of people just don't know that there are other solutions to the problem, because the people that talk the most about environmentalism, the people that are most outspoken about it, are generally people who favor government intervention.
So would libertarians support, really, I guess, there's a lot of federal government land, especially out west. States like Utah, I think it's like over 70% of the land is owned by the federal government. Would they advocate it, selling off that land to private owners, or like national parks or state forests, stuff like that?
I think it depends on the libertarian. Personally, I don't think that we should be selling off Yellowstone, but some of the land that the federal government owns now could be sold off. Definitely not all those national parks, just because, I think that we do have some sort of responsibility to, make sure that species don't go extinct, but in terms of the massive programs that we have now in that department, they could be generally scaled back, and that's generally what I'm for, across the board, is a scaling back of all government programs. They're all necessary. Not all of them are necessary, but many government programs are necessary in some fashion. They just have been massively abused. Pretty much every government program has been abused. So I think that if we looked at it from a common sense perspective, if we scaled back some of the national parks programs while still allowing them to exist, that's generally what I see. But I'm sure that some libertarians, especially the more radical libertarians, would be in favor of selling off all national parks. There's just a difference within the movement.
Yeah.
I think that's something that, we need to preserve nature more and more as society becomes more and more industrialized. Mm-hmm. And I think there needs to be some kind of push for that. Although, it makes total sense to sell them off, economically speaking. But I think we need to come together and just realize that's a bad idea.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea in some situations, and in other situations it's not. I think in most situations we could probably, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure, but I would say that a lot of federal land, in terms of just preservation aimed, could be sold off, but at the same time I don't believe in selling it all off like some libertarians might, especially, the big parks like Yellowstone, especially since the government makes a lot of money off of those parks in terms of charging people to get in. But I could also see the argument that a private company could run that land, as long as they preserved it, could run it better.
which I agree with. I mean, if you had a private company running a national park, that would be much better than the government running it. But will that private company turn Yellowstone into some sort of factory? I mean, maybe if you sold it off and then had some sort of oversight, I could see that. But
I mean, like the thing with like state parks, I've been to like all 48 states on the mainland. I've been to a lot of like campgrounds. Like the campgrounds at state parks are generally much cheaper and much better in terms of giving you like the genuine campground experience, as opposed to like private campgrounds like KOA or something, which are more expensive and which might have better amenities like showers, but if you're going for the genuine camping experience, like not just sitting in your damn RV like the whole fucking time you're camping, I think state parks provide just better campgrounds than private ones, which are more expensive, and they tend to pack them together more, which kind of takes away the purpose of getting that camping feel. So I don't know. How effective?
I think it's something we need to preserve, but
I agree that states could do a better job than the federal government. But
no, state parks all suck. And on that note, I need to go.
All right.
You can prevent wildfires.
Yeah, all right. I mean, we are actually over an hour. We're like an hour and 6 minutes or so. So that's good. Thank you guys for joining. Hopefully we got some listeners in. So we'll be up on YouTube in like 2 or 3 days. So
only you can prevent wildfires. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah. All right. See you guys.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that will be all. Thank you for tuning in. And next week, probably, I'll be having the show every Saturday now at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock Central Standard Time. So next Saturday, I'm already looking at 2 guests, including one individual who's active in the third party, specifically the Constitution Party, and he's working on a 2016 presidential campaign. And another guy, it'll be fun because it might be like a debate. He's a hardcore Keynesianism. He used to call himself a left libertarian, but I think I scared him away from the whole libertarian label. He now just admits, I'm a liberal. I want government intervention in every sphere of public life, especially the economy, and his support for Keynesianism. And that'll be a fun show. So thank you for tuning in tonight. For those of you who listened, this will be up on YouTube in a few days, and thanks for listening. So I'm Chris Lesiak signing off on the Lesiak Report.
As a teen boy, I found out just how great